Hello, and welcome to session 4 of the Leeds local offer of early help training. Just to remind you, my name is Katie, and you will need to have completed all the other sessions prior to moving on with this one. So, as we've done every session, we're just going to have a quick recap of the group agreement. Please only start this session if you've got the time to do it and that you feel ready and able to participate in the session. Have a pen and paper ready, and do take time out if any of the content does upset or overwhelm you. To remind you, in the last session, we looked at the ways we can restoratively engage families in conversations and identify needs. So in this session, we're going to use that knowledge and apply it by looking into recording assessments and developing early help plans. So by the end of the session, we should have achieved the following learning objectives. So we will have knowledge of confidentiality, consent and sharing information. You should remember that we covered quite a bit of that in session 1, but we're going to look a little bit more about information sharing in this one. Knowledge of how to create smart actions for early help plans, and develop an awareness of individual and other roles and responsibilities within early help practice. So if you need to recap on consent and what that means and looks like, please go back and listen to session 1. But before we look at assessments and plans, we need to touch on GDPR, as this informs us how, when and what we need to record and how we need to store families' information and assessments. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation and was developed in May 2018. It was and continues to be hot on the agenda for our information governance teams, the theme being that I have the right to be forgotten. As a facilitator, I cannot give you overarching guidance that is relevant to all agencies, so I would advise that outside of this training, you go back to your own organisation for up-to-date training and thorough information. However, what I can give you is 7 golden rules of information sharing that may be useful to you, and we'll look at that now. So as you'll remember from session 1, early help is voluntary and therefore consent must be sought, but that does not give us permission to mishandle or openly share information without any thought. So this slide shows 7 golden rules of information sharing that can support us in our efforts to respect and protect a family's information and privacy. Golden Rule 1. Remember that the Data Protection Act of 1998 and human rights laws are not barriers or to justify information sharing, but they are there to provide a framework to ensure that personal information about living individuals is shared appropriately. Golden Rule 2. Be open and honest with the individual and/or their family where appropriate from the onset about why, what, how, and with whom information will or could be shared. Seek their agreement for all of these areas unless it is unsafe or inappropriate to do so, and that would only be on a statutory child protection matter. Golden Rule 3. Seek advice from other practitioners if you have any doubt whatsoever about sharing of information. Remember to not disclose the identity of the individual where possible, but do seek support if you are questioning your actions. So Golden Rule 4, share with informed consent. Respect the wishes of those who do not consent to share confidential information as well. You may still share information without consent if, in your judgment, there is good reason to do so, such as where safety may be at risk. You will need to base your judgment on the facts of the case. When you are sharing or requesting personal information from someone, be certain of the basis upon which you are doing so. Where you have consent, be mindful that an individual might not expect information to be shared. Golden Rule number 5. Consider safety and well-being in all your decisions. So base your information sharing decisions on considerations of the safety and well-being of the individual and others who may be affected by their actions. Golden Rule 6. Ensure that sharing of any information is necessary, proportionate, relevant, adequate, accurate, timely, and secure. So ensure that the information you share is necessary for the purpose for which you are sharing it, and it is shared only with those individuals who need to have it. It is accurate and up to date. It is shared in a timely fashion, and it is shared securely. And our final golden rule, number 7, keep a record of your decision and the reasons for doing it, whether it is to share information or not. If you decide to share, then record what you have shared and whom and for what purpose. Equally, if you have decided not to share something, do justify that decision as well. So those two slides show a very brief overview of GDPR and information sharing. If you have further questions or have any doubts about information sharing, please speak to your manager, organisation, or your information and governance team. So now we know how to keep them and store them, we're going to look at how to complete them and move on to assessments. So as we looked at in session 3, in all our conversations we are assessing a potential support need. And sometimes it is necessary and helpful to use formal paperwork to support us in our assessment of needs. Many agencies have their own specific assessment tools or forms. For example, a DASH assessment, which stands for Domestic Abuse, Stalking and Honour-Based Violence. That is a specific assessment to assess the risk of domestic violence and abuse. If you are unsure whether your role or agency is required to complete a specific assessment, please speak to your manager after the training. For early help, Leeds has developed an early help assessment tool, which can be used for all its early help services and to support you in developing an early help plan. It doesn't matter what assessment tool you use or what form it is recorded on, but we encourage you where possible to be mindful of the 6 Ps and to formulate with your families. The Leeds assessment tool will help you with this, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. All the specific Leeds early help paperwork, the assessments, plans and forms can all be requested from families.first@leeds.gov.uk. So in Leeds, when working with children, young people and families, formulation refers to the way we understand their needs and experiences and how we use that to inform our practice. The 6 Ps were introduced to create a new way of thinking, giving practitioners the time, the space and the tools to thoroughly and robustly work with families. The 6 Ps support us to analyse the information we already have about the current circumstances, and they also help us to focus on addressing the presenting issues rather than past ones. So as I said on the last slide, the 6 Ps and these 6 boxes are what is used to make up our forms and assessments when working in early help. So it's really important that you're familiar with all of them and you know what they all mean. So I'm going to very briefly now take you through all 6 boxes and give you a rough guide of which ones we like to look at first when completing an assessment. However, there is lots of training on 6 Ps and formulation, and I would encourage you to sign up to some of that training once you've completed this early help training, and it will further inform your practice and assessments when working with families. So when assessing a family's needs and completing the assessment, it is very helpful to start with the presenting issue. That's our pink circle in the middle. So in here we would fill it with the issue or issues that are causing the concern for a family or young person or professional right now. Not what has happened, what we think is going to happen, what is happening right now. Once we have captured some of our presenting issues, we would then move into the predicting box to the left. So what is likely to happen if the presenting issues are not addressed effectively? It's very important that when completing this box we remain realistic, as it can be quite easy to jump to the extremes. So to give a very basic example, if our presenting issue was an 80 to 70% attendance decline over the last term, we may predict that attendance will continue to decline and that will affect Johnny's attainment. The predicting issue would not be Johnny is going to not be in education ever again, have no education, live a life of crime, and end up in prison. You can see from the extremes, but we do know that some of our families do get very anxious and very worried, as do professionals. So try and keep it to be very realistic and looking at the presenting issues, what can we predict may happen in the short term if we do not effectively support that need. So once we've looked at what is going on right now and our presenting issues and our predicting issues, we then try and focus on the perpetuating factors. You may remember that we looked at that in session 2. So our perpetuating factors are looking at and unpicking what is maintaining the presenting issue. We then have our other 3 boxes to complete. So we have our precipitating factors. So what happened or has happened that has triggered the presenting issues. So kind of what's going on right now that started it all, if there is anything. We then look at the predisposing. So what challenges and adverse experiences have you or the family faced now or in the past? So that looks at the history. Now we shouldn't dwell on the history too much, but it's important for us as professionals to acknowledge and be mindful of what the family have faced in the past. And finally, we need to capture the protective factors. So what strengths and positive factors are there that can be used to impact on current issues? The protective box is extremely important, as effective and sustainable change derives from a strength-focused approach. If we identify strengths early in the assessment, we can use them to implement early changes and build confidence in the family's abilities. Now, although each box poses a simple question, they are not always easy to answer, and it may take many questions and conversations to be able to actually fully answer each question and fill each box. For example, it may be too painful for a family or young person to talk about their past experiences. A family may not be able to recognise what is keeping the issue going. It may be easy for the professional, but we need to help our families get there themselves. And this is where our conversation skills help us. Assessments require trust, which is often developed over time. So if your family member struggles to give you an answer, remind them that it's okay and it can be revisited later on or at another time. You may also be able to support them by exploring the barriers to the answers, so asking why they feel unable to talk about it, and can you help them to feel more comfortable? Assessments can be ongoing and can be completed over a few days or even weeks. We may even have a plan in place based on the initial assessment, but we continue to adapt and change that as we go. So with this in mind, please don't get too hung up on completing a formulation in any particular order. You don't even have to use the boxes directly, but just be mindful of all the questions that the 6 Ps pose and use them as a framework to capture all the information you need to fully assess a family's needs. So that is an extremely brief overview of the 6 Ps and formulation, and there is specific training and forums that you can attend to improve your skills in formulation. So if the 6 Ps is new to you, or if you wish to improve on your practice, I would encourage you to attend any of the forums and training. More information on these can be found by emailing Children Innovations, which is the email address on the screen. So once we've completed our assessment and we've gained a full picture of the family's circumstances and what needs to change, we can then create a long-term goal. So a long-term goal is a broad statement that will help to set a direction of travel for what needs to happen. It should contain the family's voice, and it's okay to use their words, but it must reflect what families and young people want to achieve. A long-term goal can be one or a few sentences that will help identify what things will look like when the situation is improving. The goal should not detail the specifics of what you're going to do, but why. So what will better look like? So there are different ways to get from A to B, so the long-term goal does not need detail, but it does need to be realistic, and it does need to be very positive, so that can help motivate change. It's not our goal, it is very much the family's goal, but do be mindful that it can be reflective of the wants of professionals as well, as long as it's agreed and it's working with the family rather than professionals telling families that it has to be in, and that means working to them. So this slide shows us some examples of long-term goals. Please pause the video here and give yourself time to read them all thoroughly. We are now about halfway through session 4, so if you need a break, please do take one now by pausing the video and come back to us whenever you're ready. So just to recap, all of the support offered to a young person or family is intended to engage them in a process that aligns professionals and families in support, and support that brings about positive outcomes for children and young people. It's not a one-off event. The written assessment and long-term goal doesn't necessarily get completed in one session, and this can be positive for all, as it gives people time to reflect and think through what has been discussed. It's also important as a practitioner that you do have the time to consider, reflect, and have discussions with your line manager or in supervision about the unknown areas or about anything that's been raised. It helps ask the question, have you got all the information you need and the consent to be able to bring a team around the family together? So if the answer is yes, and there are multiple goals that require multiple agencies to help the family, then we need to establish an early help plan. So all early help plans need a lead professional. The lead professional is a very rewarding and important role, and the lead needs to be the first point of contact for the family, so it's important that they are someone with a trusted relationship with the family that can provide appropriate challenge and support that will be engaged well with. So do ensure that the lead professional is agreed with the family prior to any meetings. It is ideal for the lead professional to be the one that has completed the assessment, as it helps to build a relationship with each family member and gain trust and a thorough understanding around the support needs. However, this is not always possible, so if it hasn't, then it's important for the lead professional to sit down with the family and talk through the assessment prior to any larger meetings. So the lead professional is responsible for managing the multi-agency team around the family, and to coordinate and develop the plan with the family and professionals, clearly outlining the intended outcomes and measuring for each goal. The lead professional needs to confirm consent with families and confirm information sharing with agencies and be clear about each agency's remit. You must remember that all agencies will have their own priorities for what the family needs, and it's up to you to work with the family and professionals and decide what needs to happen first. As well as developing the plan with the family and professionals, you need to be able to hold professionals accountable to the plan and be prepared to challenge and support in providing solutions to achieve the desired outcomes, as well as being able to do this with your family. The lead professional is responsible to ensure that reviews and plans are still relevant and continue to work towards the long-term goal. When the plan has been achieved, it's important that the lead professional supports the family with an exit plan and ensure that there is the right resilience within the family to manage their own circumstances without the need for the support from services. It is also the lead professional's responsibility to keep records and documentation and ensure that it is held appropriately within the organisation. You do not need to submit any assessments or any plans to the local authority, but they need to be circulated in a timely way to those involved in the plan. You need to make sure that you are not the only one in your team who can access the plan, and ensure that you have someone who can progress with it if you are suddenly absent from work. But do ensure that all records are stored in line with your own agency's retention policy and GDPR, and ensure that the family knows who will take over the plan if you are absent. Although the lead professional is a lead, they are part of a team, and all the team around the family should also support each other and support the family in achieving the goals. And as I said first, the lead professional role is very rewarding. It allows us to have very deep and trusting relationships with our families, and it's always wonderful to see the goal being achieved and the family's needs being met. So once it has been agreed that an early help plan is going to take place and the family have consented, we ask that you contact the family's first team on either the number or email on the screen to register the early help plan. Registering an early help plan and your lead professional status for the family is really important. It allows us to communicate any new referral information to you straight away. That could be incidents from the police, incidents through the NHS, any new referrals to Children's Social Work Services, or if anyone calls and says, I think this family need help, we can signpost them directly to you. This means that you can be kept fully up to date with the family's circumstances, and it will help to inform the plan and review moving forward. So a good plan is made up of goals that include an equal measure of challenge and support. Now remember that challenge does not mean conflict. It is a conversation about what could be different or what needs to change. So on this slide is an image of the social discipline window and the 4 ways of being. You may be familiar with this, you may not, but I will talk you through it with a simple example. So if we use our attendance example, and a family are really struggling to bring a child in on time every day. If we as a professional just went to pick up the child and brought them into school, we would be working for the family. So we'd be right along that bottom axle of just support. There would be no challenge, we would just be supporting them by doing everything for them ourselves. On the other side, if we told the family that they had to get the child into school on time, otherwise further action would be taken immediately, we would just be working to the family. We'd be up in that left top box of just challenging the family with no support at all, and it's likely in that box that our families won't trust us and will alienate themselves from us. And if we did absolutely nothing and ignored the issue, we would be in the not box, so that red box in the bottom left. With no challenge and no support, we are achieving no outcomes and doing nothing. So to create positive change, we need to be in the with box, that healthy green top right box, with a good balance of challenge and support. And that's by helping the family identify what is causing the presenting issue and supporting them to overcome it. And as we've said lots in this session already and previous sessions, it requires open, honest, and interested conversations. Achieving the with box might take a few little steps. For example, in this particular example of attendance, the family just might be really struggling with day-to-day morning routines, such as getting the breakfast out and ready and eaten. So one way we could combat that is by helping the family bring the child into school for maybe morning breakfast club, and the school could support with the breakfast routine there. We would then, in time, as confidence is built, look at addressing how can we make the morning routine at home more manageable, and we would slowly but surely overcome those barriers step by step to get to a positive outcome. So we sometimes can't do things all at once, and that's okay, and that's exactly what the plan in place is there for, to set goals and reassess them week on week and to make slow changes to achieve positive change. And we also make our plans effective by having smarter plans. So remember our acronym from part 1 and in our learning objectives? Well, we're finally going to break it down for you. So when we're developing a specific goal within the plan, we need to make sure that it's SMART. So some of you may have already come across the SMART acronym. And if you have, then that's great. It will give you some good foundations. Some of the letters do mean something slightly different in this context than to the national model, but we're going to go through all that. And if you've never heard or seen of SMARTER before, then don't worry, because that's what we're going to talk about now. So when developing our goals, they need to be specific. And that means that all outcomes and actions should be concrete, detailed, child-focused, and well-defined. So everyone should know exactly what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and by who. They should always be measurable. So the outcomes and actions need to be measurable to help track progress. Otherwise, how will you know any change has occurred? All goals need to be agreed by the family and professional. All our outcomes and actions must be agreed by everybody around the table. We can't expect people to achieve things if people disagree with what they're supposed to be doing. All our goals need to be realistic. So professionals, family members, and the young person, where appropriate, should have input and agreement into developing feasible outcomes and actions. There is no point in setting something that we know is not going to be able to be achieved. Our goals need to be timely, and that means to have clear timescales that are based on an understanding of the needs of the child and any risk. So the final two letters are what we do in our review meetings. So all our goals throughout the entire plan should always be SMART. And at each meeting, we evaluate and review all our goals. So we evaluate by discussing and considering if progress has been made against the actions. And reviewing it, we discuss and consider whether the action is adequate or whether something different would be more helpful to make progress. So we're going to move on to a little activity that will help you understand and start planning SMART goals. So the first example is, I'll rarely have a takeaway in the future. So I'd like you to pause the video here and have a think. Is that goal specific? Is it measurable? Is it agreed? Is it realistic? And is it timely? Okay, so let's have a look. So it's not specific, rarely means something different to a lot of people. It's therefore not measurable either, because one person's rarely is another person's a lot. We can assume it's agreed, but it may not be. It's not realistic because rarely is an unknown amount, and saying that you will rarely have something in the future is such a long-term, vast statement, we can't make it a realistic goal. And finally, it's not timely. The future is not timely, that is limitless. So let's look at another example. I'll try to have one less takeaway than I normally do. Pause the video here and see if it's specific, measurable, agreed, realistic, and timely. Let's see what you got for that one. So it's not very specific, and I'll try to isn't a very good way to start a goal. It is measurable. One less takeaway than I normally do is a measurable amount. We'll assume it's agreed. We'll assume it's realistic, but again, it may not be. But it's not very timely. One less takeaway than you normally do in a week, in a month, in a year, for the rest of your life. We just don't know. So it's not a very accurate SMART goal. So our final goal, I'll only have a takeaway on the first Friday of the month. So this is a SMART goal. It is specific, it's strong. I'll only have a takeaway on the first Friday of the month. It's therefore measurable. We can measure it on the first Friday of every month, and if we have a takeaway on another day, we know that we haven't achieved the goal. We'll assume it's agreed, we'll assume that it's realistic, and it is timely. It is within the month, and we can review this each week and each month to ensure that we've achieved it. So let's move on to trying to write a SMART goal. So I'm going to give you the desired outcome, and I'd like you to pause the video and take some time to think about the action and who will lead it and by when. So the desired outcome is to reduce the amount of sugar my children eat and ensure they have a regular, established, healthier eating habit. So I want you to really think about how you can make the action SMART. So please pause the video and take as long as you need and resume when you feel like you've got a good answer. Super! So how did you find that? Now, you won't have the same as me, but that's absolutely fine. But I will give you an example just so you can get a feel of what a SMART outcome might look like. So the action we have in place is that Monday to Friday, I will put 2 pieces of fruit in my children's lunchbox and only add chocolate bars on Tuesdays and Fridays. And that's something that I think can be led by Mum, who I've called Janine. And I've put a specific date in by when, or to be reviewed by the next meeting. But if you do have a review by next meeting statement, do try and put the date in where possible. Obviously, I don't know when you're listening to this, so I've just put a random date in. It's clearly in the past, but just put a date in that works best for you and your families. So hopefully you will agree that to achieve the desired outcome, we have established a SMART action. It is specific, it is measurable, it is agreed, it is realistic, and it is timely. So hopefully you will have access to the early help paperwork by now, but if not, here is a screenshot of the early help plan. So you can see that the plan and the paperwork is structured to support and guide professionals into writing SMART plans, just like what we've looked at. So when we're first establishing a plan, we are looking to the left-hand side of this paperwork, so completing the agreed outcomes, the agreed next steps, by who and when. So the column on the right, where you can see upon review, is what we aim to achieve and complete when we review and evaluate. So do you remember in the last session, we looked at how scaling questions can support us in working towards change? Well, they can also be fantastically effective in helping professionals and families observe the change throughout the process of the plan. It can support us in measuring outcomes, which fulfills our SMART aims. So remember, everyone feels and interprets things slightly differently, but by using a scale, it helps us to see change more accurately. If someone was asked on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy do you feel in your life at the moment, and they say 3, and then we ask them the same question in 2 weeks' time and they said 6, we can see a significant improvement. It can also prompt us to look at what changes have been effective or ineffective since we last met. And the sliding scale can also help families see and reflect on changes. We often ask people how they are and they reply the same, but if we had the sliding scale, the answer might reflect something different. And that's why you can see on the paperwork a small box that says rate 1 to 10. It may not be applicable for every agreed outcome, but the option is there and we would encourage you to use it where it is appropriate. So when looking at desired outcomes and managing SMART actions, It's important to be realistic in the plan as a whole with your families. There is no point in putting 10 goals specifically for one person to do because it won't be achievable. So really look as a lead professional at what is relevant and what can be achieved between now and the next meeting. We need to really learn and understand our families and judge what would be appropriate for them. Some families can cope with loads and can be really proactive and very ready for change. Others could feel very disheartened and lose confidence if you put too much on there and they don't achieve it. And those families, we may need to just put one goal. And then when we review, we see how that goes and we slowly build it up. So by using your skills as a professional, the team around the family, and having open and honest conversations, it's up to you to develop a realistic plan for the family. If you need support and guidance from that, you can speak to your managers, you can speak within supervision, and if you need further support, then you can access that through clusters and early help hubs. So your homework to do before the next session is, if you haven't already, please request the Leeds Early Help paperwork from Families First. The email is shown on the screen. And familiarise yourself with the assessment tool and the action plan. So whilst looking over the assessment tool and the action plan, do reflect and be mindful on the conversation techniques and think about the types of questions that we would ask families whilst completing the assessment tool. So to recap, in this session we have looked at recording assessments and early help plans, and in the next session we are going to look at reviewing plans and closing plans effectively. If you wish to have any further training on any of the specific topics that we've covered in this session or in previous sessions, then please visit the Leeds Safeguarding Partnership website. There's loads of information on there that will help further your early help practice, and that is where all the training is listed. For more support on Rethink, so our 6Ps in formulation, please contact the Children Innovations team. So thank you all again for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.